yeah. It's okay. You don't need to have it in there, dude. It's fine. Now you look like you're living in someone's basement. Squeeze. It's like you're living on 86th Street again. Remember? It's nice and tight. I mean, my spot's a tiny, tiny San Francisco apartment, so you know how it is. Nice. Am I coming in clear?
Yeah, how about me? Am I good?
Yeah, you're good. All right. Remember, once we start, we're good. That's good. That's good. I like the fact that you have the flag, and you can't really tell what's on the TV. It's kind of like you can tell that it's news, but you can't tell what's going on with it.
It's Fox News.
It's the best news. It's the best news source. Right. So I mean, we are recording now, so don't worry. I could always just chop this stuff out once you figure it out. That's an interesting one, man. You really got the American thing going. I like it.
There you go. Can you hear me?
America.
I'll just hide behind the hat the whole time.
I know it's too much. It's too much. It's good to see your face. You know, that people, especially if we're gonna put this on YouTube.
Yeah, so. I'm Benjamin's brother. Please don't kill me, Antifa.
I know. That's what I was gonna say. You look like a American terrorist with that on. It looks like you're covering your face with the American bandana. Anyway, America. Hold on. What would it would be like? Budweiser.
Anyway, everything is working good now. Okay, I have a new computer, just so you know. So I
Nice.
installed it yesterday.
Nice. What kind of computer did you get?
It's a HP Elite Desk
That's cool.
i5 7th gen. It's doing good.
I don't even know what 7th gen means, but it must be good because it's better than 1 gen. So.
Yeah, the i3 I think was the 1 gen. Now the i5. Now there's actually an i7, but that thing is like $3,800, and I'm not spending that kind of money on a computer on a desktop.
Yeah, especially a desktop. That's ridiculous. I mean, unless it's Mac, then it's okay. That's what I'm just kidding.
That's what people buy Macs. They buy Macs to show off. Like oh, look at me, I have a Mac. They sit at Starbucks with their Mac. That's the thing. You don't see anybody sitting at Starbucks with their Microsoft computer.
It's true. Or if they do, it's like covered in some kind of bookcase, not case, like what do they call those again? Anyway, whatever. But yeah, I mean,
and if my eyes look a little teary, it's because I chopped a ton of onions and made onion rings about an hour ago. So the whole house is permeated with onions right now. And if my eyes look a little watery, it's because of that.
I'm excited. The fact, you sure you weren't hitting some of that sweet New York bud?
Oh yeah, that's what I do. Yeah. Sure.
I know you don't, man.
I get it from the gardener.
Yeah. Listen, it's the season. You got to start planting now so you can harvest in October.
Yeah. I haven't even started my garden yet. Where's your California flag you were going to drape over the door?
I couldn't find one yet, so I have to get one to drape a California flag here. I'll do it. I'm gonna make it happen. I've been, we talked about this on Thursday, and I've been doing. I mean, about Herman Cain, about Julian Assange, about.
I sent you the article about Julian Assange from the New York Times.
Yeah, and I sent you the one from the New York Post. I mean, obviously, we're thinking of the same thing, right? Because it is big news, especially this week. I mean, especially with Assange, that guy's like. What I think is hilarious, in my opinion, is that everybody. Like either you hate him or you love him, but it's like all of a sudden because people perceive him that he helped Donald Trump, everybody all of a sudden did like a 180. So the people that used to hate him because he would give out information, America's secrets, and like Chelsea Manning used him to show the fact that the United States actually killed innocent reporters in Iraq a couple of times. All of a sudden, those people who were totally against WikiLeaks, all of a sudden because Trump was okay with WikiLeaks, all of a sudden they released Hillary's emails. They're like, oh, WikiLeaks is the best. And then on the other side of it all, the people who are so pro WikiLeaks say, yeah, we need the information out there. We know. All of a sudden, those people have totally fucking like right now on all the news shows and they're like Assange is like this enemy now. He's like this like it's such a weird inverted reality where you're just like 5 years ago the left was like drinking the Assange Kool-Aid and the WikiLeaks Kool-Aid, and now
it's like that. It's like that with everything. I mean, it depends on where Mueller was, was God's gift to, he was got to protect Mueller. Now it's Mueller who? It doesn't matter. It depends on which side of the argument you fall on for which argument. But at the same time, I kind of agree. I was listening to Ben Shapiro this week. I know I'm dropping a name on a podcast. That's not good. Maybe he could sue us.
No, he can't.
I was listening to him, and he basically said the right thing. He said, if you were against Assange before, you shouldn't be for Assange now, and vice versa. The guy he's basically a Russian. He wasn't even good enough to be a Russian spy. He was a Russian stooge. They funneled tons of money to him. They let him pretend that he was Mr. Independent, but everything he geared towards was the West. Like he went after the United States big time. Everything was the West. He never went against Russia. He never went after, and anybody of any note that's a dictator. So basically his argument was, okay, so he helped Trump with the, Clinton emails. That doesn't make it a good thing. There were people that he redacted in there that got killed, who were informers, basically in Iraq, and he put out soldiers' names and addresses so people can then hunt them down in the country. I mean, it's just you shouldn't like the guy even if he did the right thing by your candidate. So
totally. Yeah, it's definitely become like a political football. Like, and whoever has the football, they're kind of like choosing what to do with it. So the thing is, like you said, you're going one way down the field and you're like, I'm going to use the Assange for my football to do this one particular thing. And then the other people are doing the same. I just think it's so hypocritical. Like, like shows like the Daily Show, these night comedians that have become like overly politicized, which they used to not be so politicized. It used to be like, they would make political jokes, especially Trump has so much, the president of the United States has so much like stuff that he constantly says and does that's kind of ridiculous, right? I mean, he says the stuff that comes out of his mouth a lot of times on both sides. People are like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. But the thing is, those jokes would happen on Johnny Carson, on David Letterman. They would make fun of it.
Jay Leno was interviewed. Yeah, same thing. He was interviewed recently, and he said they've gone overboard with the political. Like the whole idea of a late night show was that people want to decompress, and if you're going to joke about someone, give equal time. There's somebody funny on the other side that you can make fun of in a nice way. You don't have to be horrid to them to be funny. And people sense that, and all you do is like, why would you want to alienate half of your audience? Like, yeah. And I know, like, when you think one political way, you think, oh, nobody else thinks, there must be a little group of crazy people on the other side, but it's not like that, And if you alienate half your audience, how are you supposed to grow as a show? What, you're going to teach us on a comedy show how to think? Yeah. It's kind of stupid. Yeah. But
I think, No, I was gonna say is like I completely agree with you. I think it's a little too much. Also, it's become like I call it the 1440 news cycle. So it used to be 24/7, but there's 1440 minutes in a day, and I feel like it's become 1440. Like every minute, every second, every like moment, you're just like inundated with it. You're just like, all right, like.
Yeah, like, you're inundated if you want to be inundated. If there's nothing else on.
No, because the thing is, even like. Shows like, used to be like Good Morning America, right? Where you would have these shows where people would talk about like your recipes and, they would, not that it's vanilla, but it was just kind of like quality of life stuff. All of a sudden now it's like all the time, like you Good Morning America, it's like where are the cooking shows? Where are the feel good stories? Well,
there's HGTV and Channel 13. I mean, those channels are still there.
Well, people definitely tune out, and and the problem is, I just feel like it's also very difficult for people who want to be informed to kind of like separate the wheat from the chaff. You know what I mean? Like at some point, it's like they're so inundated that they just kind of completely turn off, and you're just like, well, you should be paying attention to some of this stuff because some of the stuff's important, right? There are things, like for instance, you sent me that article. Well, we could talk about that article. You sent me an article about or did I send it to you about the toll lanes? I sent you an article about how
you sent me the article about the toll lanes, but it depends on which side of the aisle you're on.
Yeah, but I mean, but the thing is, like, for every individual person, like, they should be paying attention. Like, for instance, in my neighborhood in San Francisco, right, they're trying to paint these bus street lanes, right, and they paint these bus lanes down Mission Avenue, and the thing is, it's made traffic terrible. I mean, it's so bad.
They're just copying New York. New York already did that and destroyed traffic in New York. Created bike lanes in the most ridiculous of places, and then threw in these rent a bicycle areas, which took away more parking, which caused more traffic. And now they finally, they've been working in New York for forever since the Brooklyn Bridge was built. They were trying to find a way to put a toll on it. They finally figured it out last week. They came out. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, they finally came out with the congestion pricing in New York that they're going to do in 2020. And it's like they finally found a way to toll every single entrance into Manhattan because you're going to have no choice. If you're driving from upstate New York, unless you cut through Jersey, there's no way you're going to miss that toll coming through Manhattan. They found a way to toll the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge.
And the thing is, in the article, it talks about Virginia like basically privatizing tolling, which is kind of like I said, like you said, you could be on both sides of how you want either government to do it or you want the private companies to do it. But the thing is, it's just like the actual individual consumer, individual Americans are going to be fucking shafted. Like they were talking about the surge pricing in this one particular area in Maryland. It cost somebody $50 to cross over one time because it was so busy and there were so many cars that it actually drove the price up to $50. I mean, I just don't think people understand. And the thing is, like, so once again, back to what we're talking about, is like people get so wrapped up in this kind of stupidity of this kind of the circus that is politics at times that they forget like there's real issues. Like, me showing up yesterday to this meeting being like, hey, no more bus lanes. I showed up because I was like, because they're trying to do it into my neighborhood. Before, it's kind of a part. There's Cesar Chavez Avenue, which is like from Cesar Chavez on, it sucks. But before that, it's actually not too bad. Traffic is bad, but all of a sudden you're going to squeeze 2 lanes of car traffic into 1 lane, and then only the buses can drive in this 1 lane. And it's so asinine. And it's so ridiculous. And the thing is, like I said, people are so focused on stupid stuff. Like in San Francisco, for instance, they're trying to get rid of they're trying to make e-cigarettes illegal. Right, so you can't buy e-cigarette juice, right? Which is, I mean, in my head, I'm just like,
marijuana is legal, but e-cigarette juice,
no. People using heroin on the street happens all the time in San Francisco, and on top of that, people can still buy cigarettes, right? So you can still go get regular cigarettes. So what do you think is going to happen to people who quit cigarettes to use vaping, which is vaping is 95% less harmful? I mean, that's what the articles say, 95% less harmful. All of a sudden now you're just like, oh, we're gonna push them back towards cigarettes? I mean, it's unbelievable. So the thing is, I just feel like people sometimes are just, like I said, that's why I like the toll booth article, because it's so like that's people's pocketbooks, that's people's money, that's people's wallets. Just like you're talking about New York City. I remember you were complaining before about how New York, Bloomberg jacked up the parking tickets. Like I was telling my coworker how much parking tickets cost in New York, and he was, San Francisco parking tickets are bad, but it's nowhere near New York level. I mean, New York is just insane. Like you could literally like bankrupt somebody almost if they get enough parking.
I know people that have lost their licenses and then their cars because they didn't pay their ticket. We had one of our employees, she parked in front of the place for 10 minutes to run upstairs. She came downstairs, her car was booted. Then she's upstairs crying to us, can she borrow $850 to pay off her parking tickets?
Whoa.
Because you literally, like in Manhattan, if you get stuck crossing the street with your car because, they purposely made all the traffic terrible to get the congestion pricing, if you get stuck in the middle, a ticket agent will be hiding on the corner and run diagonally into the center of the street and bloop your car. It happened to me. $140, $125, $140 ticket. And there's nothing you can't explain to them. Well, listen, I was at the corner. I started going, but no, the traffic across the street never moved. So I got stuck in the middle. They don't want to hear it. They just laugh at you and they run back to the corner, wait for the next red light. They literally do that in New York City.
SF is a little bit more. There are some what's good about San Francisco is they do kind of pay attention a little bit to stuff like that. For instance, there's this one intersection I cross every day when I go to work every morning in downtown San Francisco. And it's so bad. Like the traffic is so terrible that, like you said, it would block the intersection. So they would actually have meter maids out there ticketing cars. And that happened for 2 months. And those tickets are really expensive if you block an intersection. But then at some point, enough people complained to the city of San Francisco. So instead of ticketing, those meter maids actually become traffic enforcers, right? So
which is same thing. Common sense, right? But
it's common sense.
There's no traffic enforcement standing in the middle of the street saying stop, don't go yet. No, the city knows they're going to make so much more money to hide her on the corner. She comes running diagonally across the street and bloops you, and then it's runs back. She doesn't even give you the ticket unless you're still stuck there when it prints out of her electronic printer. You'll get it in the mail. So she doesn't care.
I know exactly. And even if you try to go away, they're just taking pictures. Same in San Francisco. Like people try to drive away from parking tickets sometimes, and I just laugh at them. I'm like, they already took a picture of your license. Like that thing's coming in the mail, and they actually write it like drove away on the ticket.
Exactly. That's what they write.
Like,
and not only that, but now they're doing a pilot program in New York City after building all those bus only lanes. So they make one little lane for cars, and the buses are weaving in and out of the bus lane because they're trying to cut in front of each other. So they're just causing so much traffic. But now they're going to have cameras in the buses that will record your license plate if you go into the bus lane, and you'll get a ticket in the mail.
Big brother, always watching, man. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's just, like I said, I feel like San Francisco sometimes is positively reactive to things. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, there's a big actually coalition. It's weird. It's called the Bike Coalition in San Francisco. People in other cities probably have their own bike coalitions, but the bike coalition in San Francisco is ridiculously powerful. And like even the previous mayor who just passed away last year, Ed Lee, he died of like a heart attack. He was elected because of the bike coalition. Like before, the mayor was like, we don't care.
He had a heart attack. Was he riding his bike every day?
Yeah, right. No. Actually, it's funny. He didn't live too far from me, so he had a heart attack in like a supermarket, not too far from here. Unfortunately, he died, and he was he was the mayor. Imagine the mayor of the city dying. And San Francisco is a big city. The thing is, he was hated and loved at the same time. But the thing is, he was very supported by the Bike Coalition because he put forth all these bike forward projects. The problem is, it's kind of like, if you let people have their wet dream all the time, they go a little overboard. You know what I mean? And I like the idea of bicycles. I like bike lanes. I like the idea of actually helping bicyclists not get killed, creating those barriers so the cars can't get into the bike lane. I've been to Amsterdam. I totally respect it. But there's some things that they do where it's just like for instance, there's a part of Market, which is like a main throughway of San Francisco, that they're about to cut off to build this like weird kind of park/bike area. So no cars are going to be able to go through, only bicycles, only buses. But the problem is San Francisco has such a huge homeless problem. So the thing is, what's going to happen? And you sent me an article
take over the park and sleep there.
Yeah, they're going to take over the park. I mean, even the Civic Center, which is the it looks very Romanesque, beautiful buildings, columns. Because San Francisco, they built out this whole Civic Center area. It's like when you go there, it's like people are shooting up right in front of you all the time. I mean, every time of day. And it's not hyperbole. I'm not like making this shit up. Like, some people are like, oh my God, there's so many crackheads. No, there are a shit ton of heroin addicts, and they are shooting up right in front of you. I mean, I just told somebody the story, a couple of days ago, like 2 or 3 months ago. I get off the BART downtown, 8:00 in the morning. I get off the BART. There's some fucking guy with his pants around his ankles, his ass is showing, his dick is hanging out, and I'm just walking down the street, and all these San Franciscos are just like, oh, I don't see anything. And I'm like, and I could tell he's just high off his ass. So I go up to him, and I'm like, hey, buddy, come on, man. And then he like comes to enough to be like, oh yeah, my pants are by my fucking ankles. I should pull my pants up. And he does that. The problem is, it's just like, SF, I feel like it's weird. Like I said, they're very responsive sometimes, but other times you're just like, who came up with this idea? Like, what kind of cockamamie idea was this? You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. But I think that's all civic governments. The problem with politicians and civic politicians in particular, in my opinion, is that they kind of like, they're so busy trying to prove the fact that they should be there. So sometimes they create busy work, right? They create these things to like validate the purpose that they got elected for. You know what I mean? Yeah. They're like, oh, I got elected. Let me show you that I did some stuff. Sometimes doing nothing is just as good as doing something. You know what I mean? So,
I know, but they always want to act like they're doing something. And on top of it, also you have to remember, like you said, they're a powerful coalition, the bike people. So, if you please your base, you cruise to re-election, but easier next time. So.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I heard. Is there a politician in San Francisco that has like turned to everybody and said no? Like this is enough. Like no way. We're not doing it.
No.
No,
it's
a great idea.
They're outdoing themselves.
No, we're not doing it.
No way. They're just the opposite. They're outdoing themselves. They're constantly in San Francisco in particular. They're because the thing is, the mayor is this powerful position, but actually a lot of the city's governance is actually done by these city council members. And I think there's like 12 or 13 of them. I forget the number. And like. So, and they all have a district, so where I live is District 11, and there's all these different districts all over the area. And the thing is, each one of those people, they're kind of trying to outdo each other in like the progressive model. and not just progressive, like liberal, like different stuff, and I get it, not to mention, being elected, you have to have a name. So if you don't have a name, it's hard for people to recognize you. But if you could say like, hey, I was the guy who got rid of, vaping, you know what I mean? Then people are like, oh, he got rid of cigarette use. It's like vaping and cigarette use, not the same thing. I know at least 3 people who quit cigarettes and vape now. Sure, they vape a lot, but you know what? They're probably not going to get cancer like a regular cigarette user is going to get cancer, right? They're not actually polluting like cigarette people are polluting, right? I mean, literally, even the cigarette butts, right? That shit's nasty. That goes into the ocean. It kills animals. No, nobody's throwing out vaping cartridges into the ocean. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody's throwing their vaping cartridge into a drain. It goes into a trash heap and goes. You know what I mean? So the thing is, it's just sometimes it's just so ridiculous.
Even President Obama, I think last week came out and said that. He said sometimes, groups, he was talking about the Democrats. Sometimes they get too pure, and then they form.
Totally.
What was his words? They form what we call a circular firing squad. Like, what does the rest of the world call it? A circular firing squad. But it was funny that he was like, they form their own circular firing squad, because everybody tries to outpure the other one.
Well, you know what? I mean, and the funny thing is, it's happened on the Republican part. The Republican side as well. I mean, if you look at the Tea Party's done that. Yeah. I mean, you see that all the time. Like, people are getting primaried from the right. You're like, really? That guy's ridiculously
sometimes
conservative.
You need that for a while. I know it hurts you in the short term, but sometimes you need that for a while just to kick reality back into the whole party, because it gets too complacent, becomes too bureaucratic, becomes too many people try to protect their own little turf, and then you come in with these upstarts who a lot of times say a lot of stupid things, AOC from New York. But
there's a lot of stupid people out there.
What they're doing is they're causing people to have to rethink, whether it's rethink stuff they already believe or rethink things they don't agree with to maybe find a compromise. So I don't see it as such a bad thing to have the nut jobs. You always need the nut jobs on the core at the fringes of the party. It's when the nut jobs take over the whole party. That's when you have a real problem. But I think they're having their own Tea Party right now with this new green deal.
Bernie Sanders leading the way. A lot of his ideas about
another guy that's going to lose spectacularly.
That's if he gets actually out of the primaries.
He'll
the
get
thing
out
is,
of
if you look at, I don't know about that, dude. The thing is, I follow him and I read a lot of articles about him and his ability to win and stuff like that. And like the established Democrats are very much not about Bernie Sanders. They do not want him to be the leader. They do not want him to be the candidate. They don't want a bunch of people like Tulsi Gabbard, right? They don't want her to be, even though if you look at her voting record, she's more progressive than tons of Democratic liberals. Not to mention she would make an excellent candidate, because I personally don't think you should be allowed to be president of the United States unless you've served in the military at least once in your life. Some fashion. You could be National Guard. That's just my opinion. I would. Oh, my bad. Hopefully it didn't screw up too bad. Anyway, my point is that I just think that, there's a lot of candidates that they're kind of like, and then like right now, if you look who they're going towards, it's either Joe Biden or that Buttigieg guy, right? And the thing is, like, Joe Biden, he's like, creeper in chief. Especially once again, I think it's so ridiculous. Like, these people.
You don't just grab him by he grabs him by everything and smells their hair at the same time.
And smells their and give him kisses on the back of the head. I mean, I don't know, like Grandpa Biden. And they were trying to spin it. They're trying to be like, oh, he does that to men and women. So, he's just an affectionate guy.
So does Buttigieg, really? Or whatever the hell his name is.
Well, that guy is interesting because he served in the military. He actually has, he is really good at arguing. If you listen to Buttigieg, whatever the fuck that guy is. Anyway, the thing is, he's
a gay Christian.
Well, he's a gay Christian. Not to mention, he's totally like.
There's no such thing as a gay Christian. Because if you're going to be a Christian, you're going to have to kill yourself, because it says you can't be a homosexual and be a Christian at the same time. It's sort of like being a gay Jew. You know what I mean? Yeah, I stone myself every morning before I get out of bed. You know what? You're something like a Jew, but you're not a Jew. You're something else. Because if you followed that Judaism, you'd be stoned to death. They'd throw you off a crane in Saudi Arabia. Like now they formed this gay mosque. Did you see about that? This gay and lesbian mosque?
Gay mosque? Where is that at?
I think it's in Canada. But the thing is, they're also afraid. Like they had to build these walls, like where you drive up and then you get out of your car and you walk along the wall because they're afraid some Muslim guy's going to show up in a machine gun and shoot them all because it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
they're insulting Islam. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Jews, chances are they're not going to come and stone you to death because they haven't done that in 2,000 years. And Christians, chances are they're not going to burn you to death because they haven't done that in 300 years. But the thing is, only 300.
Only
At least
300.
they, at least they stopped doing that. But Muslims, they'll take you to the top of that crane and throw you off like they do in Saudi Arabia.
Well, yeah, and in particular, or even that guy in Brunei. You sent me an article on Facebook about that. The Sultan of Brunei, who's like basically completely outlawed all types of being gay. No,
And
for
also, I
sure.
think he also outlawed Christianity now, so you can't even practice your
Really.
religion if you're a Christian anymore there as well.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, unfortunately, it's just like any type of religious fundamentalism. Unfortunately, it just kind of leads to just it just leads to, like you said, it leads to less freedom, right? And that's why I love being
Well, it's
American,
religion.
for
It's
instance.
not freedom. It's religion. It
It's
has
rules.
rules, and you got to follow those rules. It's not there's no debate in religion. Like
Well, that's why I think that's why when you have, like, for instance, in Judaism, right? You have like the Reform, Judaism, right? Isn't that what it's
banjo
called?
playing Jews.
Yeah, yeah. And then also in Christianity, you have
Protestant.
well, not just Protestant, but and Protestant is like a huge garden variety of, like, talk about smorgasbord potentials. I mean, talk about, in Judaism you have like two or three possible other than like fundamentalism. But the thing is, unfortunately, I don't really see in the Muslim world, don't there's Sufi, right, Muslims who are very like mystic and like, and they kind of live like a little bit more kind of free. But I agree with you. I don't really see, like, in Shia and Sunni, which are the huge main sects of
Yeah, I know,
if
but
you actually follow
they
the rules.
Sunni and Shia break into lots of groups too. And don't forget, there's that Ahmadiyya Muslim guy that keeps showing up on the right wing news channels, and he keeps slamming Islam as and he's a religious man. He's an imam. They're a pretty big group, but I think they're mostly in Israel because they've been killed in the rest of the Arab world, so they only live in Israel now. But yeah, there is no large group of moderate Muslims. There are a large group of moderate Christians. There are a large group of moderate Jews or banjo playing Jews, and
Yeah, yeah, and they consider themselves a group. They're, when you say large group, because the thing is, like, someone listening to this might misinterpret what you're saying and say, "Oh, he means like there's not a large group of Muslims out there who are moderate." But the thing is, we're talking about as
they're not
that people
organized.
self-identify. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
not organized. They don't self-identify. They don't say, "Hey, I'm a Jewish guy, but you know what? I have a ham sandwich because I'm a Reformed Jew." Right? Pigs are cool now because we understand how the science works, but with trichinosis. You know what I'm saying? Like,
There ain't no
I
lightning
think
bolts coming down to get me.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think, unfortunately, like, I feel like sometimes people are so like, "Oh my God, you're an Islamophobe," and it's like, well, no, it's just kind of, I'm looking like critically at a religion. Am I not allowed to look at things critically and be
Not
like,
not in that
hey,
religion though.
yeah, no, no. For instance, what I always think is hilarious is that the current marriage between, like, feminism and Muslims being like, I should be able to wear my hijab, which is fine. I have no problem. Just like nuns in the Catholic Church and women who all over the world have shown their kind of like chastity by wearing things. It's been the case on some level. You're right that the full burqa is the next level of that. But what I'm saying is, there's always been that, right? There's always been that kind of chastity idea. But the thing is, the idea of feminism, this idea that women should be controlled by religion and be treated differently than men, and then you marry that to like somebody wearing a hijab and being like, I'm a feminist. It's like, wait a second, are you? Because
You know
in
why? It's
countries
because
where,
those feminine women really want strong men. I'm sorry. Deep down, in the end, they want strong men. They don't want the weak Western man in the end. They might talk all this game about
why
the
the
weak Western man is wonderful. We're going to turn him into a female. But then when it comes down to it, who do they end up marrying? Some strong man from somewhere else. Because they're like, these men are women. I'm not marrying them. So that's usually what happens. Is it starts out with, oh, we're going to change these tough men around us so we're equal. And then what do they end up doing? They end up supporting the people that are going to throw them right back into the chains.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I kind of disagree. I think it's more like, I think that the thing is, it's just because of identity politics, I think it's easy to marry those things together. Because of identity politics, which I'm not a huge fan of myself, I think that it's like, there's this idea that it's like if there's some kind of group that's an out group, and right now Muslims are considered the out group because of there are people who are afraid of Muslims and there are people who attack mosques. I mean, look what just happened in New Zealand, right? So there is this idea that Muslims are somehow being and not even the case like in the Rohingya Muslims in China right now. There's a bunch of Muslims who are being brought to re-education
Sounds
camps.
like Lord of the Rings. They're the Rohingya Muslims.
They're coming. They're riding in, dude.
Meanwhile, the Saudi Arabian king went to visit China or something like that, or his ambassador, and he was just like, "Yeah, we're fine with what you're doing as long as you keep pumping money towards us." So politics in the end, the religion goes out the window. But
also just power.
Yeah. Listen, the reason why people are focused on Muslims right now is because they don't have a central, Jews are too small. If Jews were huge, they would probably be like the Muslims. They don't have a central authority like Christianity does. There is no Buddha. There is no, what's that guy who runs around in his orange robe? The Dalai Lama. There is no, there is no Pope that's busy on the floor with his ass up in the air. You know what I'm saying? So there is none of that in Islam. And anybody can wake up tomorrow and say, you know what, I have the right way. And I'm going to open my own little school. I'm going to make kids sit there for 14 to 20 hours a day and just read these books on the floor. Sound familiar? And, and they're going to start their own religion. And nobody's going to condemn them because they're all afraid of the if when that guy in Christchurch killed all those Muslims, that day, Christians galore stood up and said this was wrong, this was whatever. People threw flowers, people whatever. Everybody stood up and condemned it. You didn't hear anybody standing up and saying, you know what? Yeah, some people did something. Nobody stood up and did that. Right away, they jumped up and they were like, this was our community. They're part of us. But when something in Islam happens, you don't see that because they're too afraid. They might be a minority, but they're too afraid to speak up because that 1%, which is 100,000 people, will come to your house and kill you. And that's what they're afraid of.
I could see that perspective. I agree with you. Bringing up that Ilhan Omar thing. I think people are being a little too literal about it. Americans in general.
A little too literal. Hold on, let me finish. That day. I was in New York City and saw people jumping out of the buildings. Do me a favor.
I understand.
You don't say some people did something. Muslims did something, and all Muslims paid for it. Correct. Fight that. No problem. But the way she said it, and even when CARE came on afterwards to explain it, the guy wouldn't say who those people were because there is an automatic defensive thing where you do not talk ill of Islam. Even if Islam did something really bad. Did you see Muslim groups coming out when 40-something people died in Florida?
A group of people, but wait a second. But you're saying that Islam did something bad, but there's a group of people who have the idea of Islam. But like you said just earlier, there's no central authority. There's no religious person out there
but did mass groups of everyday Muslims come out and with candles and have prayer vigils and meet? No, none of that happened. When 40-something people died in that nightclub in Florida, that was about just as big as that Muslim attack in Newchurch in New Zealand. Did you see Muslim communities all over the United States having candlelit vigils for those people from that nightclub? When they blew up that concert in London, what's her name?
Ariana Grande.
Ariana Grande, Dunkaf. She was there having her concert. She's a ditz. And how many people died in that thing? Did you see candlelight vigils? Did you see the whole nation standing up of Muslims and crying it like you saw of Christians and Jews doing? You saw none of that. And don't tell me, the media just didn't show it. The media would have showed it if it was there. But it's not there. Some Muslims showed up. And I'm sure most Muslims in their heart felt, that really sucks. But they don't stand up because they do not criticize Islam publicly. I'm sorry. It just happens. That's my opinion.
Well, you're right. I mean, the idea of actually being critical within the religion is very difficult when you have a bunch of fundamentalists running whole countries. There's no Christian nation in the world right now. Right? There's no Jewish nation. If you go to Israel,
Is a Jewish
No,
nation.
they call themselves a Jewish nation, but they run their country.
No, they have a rabbinate that controls most of the laws besides the few public laws. Like you want to get married in Israel, you got to go to a rabbi. You want to get divorced, you go to a rabbi. There's a whole family courts are all rabbi run. Anything biblical is run by the rabbi courts in Israel. What do you?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, there's rabbi courts.
And they have Muslim courts for Muslims.
Religious stuff, but the government, right, is a secular government, right? Israel is a secular government. It's not. There's a gay pride parade. If the rabbis were running shit, there would be no gay pride parade down fucking Tel Aviv Avenue. All right. So what I'm saying is, there are no.
Is like one of the gayest cities in the world, just so you know.
Probably, you know what I'm saying? There's lots of beaches. There's nightlife. Hey, listen, man, I live in San Francisco. The gay community know how to party.
So a lot of hairy ass, baby. A lot of hairy ass.
Hey, whatever tickles people's fancies. I got no problem with it. What I'm saying is that, so the thing is, what I'm talking about is that, there's the secular world and there's the religious world. And most of Western Europe has moved away from. Now, don't get me wrong. There's old prejudices that still exist, especially anti-Semitism in Europe, which is a huge thing that's still popping its fucking head up right now, right? And then against also the Roma people.
Yes, they separated the religious from the political. Correct. In Islam, they haven't done that.
They have not. And there's a ton of countries where they're like, no, we should be living under these religious rules. And they don't understand that secularism actually allows religious to flourish better. Because then all of a sudden people are able to express their religion and don't feel like they have to kind of curtail how religious they have to be. America, even, the Puritans, people think of like the Puritans as this kind of like, oh, they were trying to do religious freedom. They were trying to do religious freedom because they were trying to be more religious than the British. And that's why they left. It wasn't because they were like, oh, we're not trying to be so religious. We're just trying to have light religion. No, they were trying to have fucking heavy. Was
it the British or the Dutch?
I think it was a little bit of both. I thought it was both countries. Anyway, but the thing is, it's just, that's why I feel like, having a secular country is so important. That's why it sucks that countries like Egypt and Turkey have moved towards more religious bullshit, right? Have moved towards more stuff like that, because those were like in the world of countries that are majority Muslim. Those are the countries that could have actually been like the beacons, could have been like the precursor to like, hey, this is how secularism works, right? And unfortunately, like
Lebanon, Turkey, Lebanon was the it was the what's that French place called, the coastline over there by the coast, the Riviera. It was the Riviera of the Middle East, Lebanon at one time. Yeah.
Or even if you look
at
Syria,
Iran was so secular. You ever watch those old videos before when the Shah was in charge? The problem is you can't have, I know this is unpopular, but it just seems like you can't have democracy in those countries because they have a vote. They have a democratic vote once. Whoever wins never gives up that power. It's sort of like It's sort of like Central America, where they have one guy.
Or Africa.
One guy wins the vote,
but they're not religious,
and he won the vote forever until he drops dead, or a general rises up and puts on one of those standardized. Like there must be a store that sells those standardized general uniforms, that you must put to fight the dictator, because they always seem to have that same uniform on. And until that guy rises up to put on the uniform and the stars. Yeah, he's got the things on the side and lots of medals for doing absolutely nothing.
He must have done a lot of battles while they were working.
A lot of battles, yeah. And
you would think they were like
one of them rises. Then the next election happens. Everyone dies for a while, and then they say, "Oh, we're going to have another election." They have another big election, and what happens? Finished. The minute the United States,
the thing is,
it's over.
Okay, I would agree with you that in other countries that don't have a kind of history of democracy, and that democracy is something that's like, especially democratic institutions, you need time to kind of build them up. Even the United States actually fought a civil war because of our democracy, and there was a general who would have probably been the general of the South, would have probably become the next president of the South. I mean, the thing is, the United States had 200 years to kind of work its way out. So we're here now in America living our free lives because of other times.
No, Europe is a result of America is a result of European fanaticism of religion. Over time, they had the Enlightenment. The Middle East never had an Enlightenment. And to have an Enlightenment, you first have to have a really dark age. So what they need is for all of the Middle East countries to become theocracies, because they've always had leaders. They never had theocracies, really. They need to have a real theocracy for 100 years, where half the population ends up dying because of fanatics. And then people will have the guts to rise and start having a renaissance and have an enlightenment where they're able to separate their religion from the physical, from the religious. Until that happens, we're not
I
going
would
to go
agree
there
with
and
you.
change.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you. Everything but Persia. I think, or Iran. I think that's the
Well,
one
Iran's in
place
the middle of
world.
a theocracy. Iran's in the middle
I
of a
know.
theocracy. And majority of
And the
people in
thing is,
that country, I think, want democracy now, real
they
democracy.
did,
I
and they
heard
had
that.
democracy at some point.
No, they didn't.
Before the
That
Shah.
wasn't a real democracy. That was
No,
Shah.
no. The Shah was backed by the United States of America, and
Yes,
then
because the
the
guy who got
Iranians elected
was a
their own
communist.
leader. Oh, so we killed him. The United States killed him.
Listen,
America
I'm not
killed him.
here. I'm not right now debating on whether the United States is trying to do the right thing or wrong thing. What I'm telling you is the guy who got elected was going to be a communist. So the United States was fighting Russia at the time, and you have to take everything in its time. You can't just say, "Oh, it's 2019, and let's put my morals of today."
Well, hold on for a second. Hold on for a second. I don't think the guy was going to be a communist. I think that is American propaganda. The reason.
Always American propaganda until.
No, I got a point. I got a good point here because it's a true point. The reason the United States did not like that guy is because he did one thing which America does all the time in its country, which is nationalizes things when it deems it necessary for the national security. America does that all the time, right? The United States nationalizes property to build roads. They're nationalizing right now stuff to try to build that wall for Trump. All I'm saying is that this guy was saying, hey, you know what? These oil fields are Iranian, and we need to own this stuff. And as soon as he did that, all of a sudden it was like, he's a communist. We need to get rid of him. You know what? Persia would have been the dominant player in the Middle East right now, and it's becoming dominant again as well. And they would have led democracy in the world, in my opinion. But the thing is, because of our choice, America's choice to actually depose that guy and reinstate a dictator, that's why we have the theocracy we have now in Persia. Now, don't get me wrong. Saudi Arabia, you're 100% correct. I mean, they are a theocracy, right? I mean, they're like a royal theocracy. Their whole legitimacy is that the fact that the House of Saud basically is the protector of the holy places, right? That's the only reason the king of Saudi Arabia has power, is because he says, hey, Mecca and Medina, I'm going to protect you. And that's why Osama bin Laden even attacked the United States, right? Because it was unholy for the United States military to have military bases in Saudi Arabia. That's why he said, that's literally what he said. He was like, these bases should not be near these holy places for Islam. Now, I'm not saying he's right or wrong. All I'm saying is that the theocracy in Saudi Arabia is based on religion. The whole monarchy there is hooked to this religion. Europe had that, I agree too, and they had this enlightenment moment. And I hope that people in the Middle East have that. The problem is, it's just like, with modern technology, the abilities of totalitarian dictatorships is through the roof. And then, not to mention, because of capitalism, countries like Israel, countries like the United States of America, we sell that technology to those countries to help with their like use of these overpowering systems of monitoring and paying attention to the shit that people don't even realize. For instance, there was an article, oh man, it's like 6-7 months ago, about how Israel was being used by multiple different people all over the world. The Israeli Mossad technology was being used by people all over the world to get reporters. It was even used by what was that guy's name? That fat guy who was caught for the Me Too movement in Hollywood. What was his name?
Harvey Weinstein?
Yeah, he was using Mossad agents. I swear to God, look this. I'm not making this up. He was using Mossad technology and Mossad agents to find out and harass people who were going to talk out against him before it really like snowballed to the point where he actually had to resign. My point is that, these theocracies, these religious countries, these places, they don't exist in a bubble, right? They don't exist in a bubble. They don't just come out of nowhere. The United States has crazy amounts of influence in the world, and to kind of like say like, oh, this country's doing this without like an American effect on that is kind of ridiculous. Like, how is it? That's not possible. The United States is like currently like crazy world dominant. Now China is in ascendancy for the same thing. It's like saying like anything happens in Africa without China fucking stamping it approval or not approval. That's bullshit. China is fucking completely taking over Africa right now. You could read article after article. Their Belt and Road Initiative that they spent trillions of Chinese dollars on are like taking all over Africa. And the thing is, people talk about American colonialism like, oh, Americans, they've come and taken over this stuff. And we've done, we've bankrupted countries. I mean, like I said, I'm not trying to say it's good or bad. It is obviously an American empire. The thing is, the Chinese are spreading their empire right now, dude. Like right now, and the United States has no answer to it, in my opinion. Anyway, I
They're
could go
not
off on
spreading
that.
an empire. They're just trying to spread their influence. There's a difference between empire and influence. And when a lot of those countries don't pay back those bills, China's going to suffer for it. Or China will eventually create such an economic powerhouse throughout those countries that it'll even if it loses, it'll gain.
Aren't you worried that it's communists? Aren't you
What?
worried? You were mentioning the communist thing earlier against like
No.
Iran.
Have you ever
So
spoken
you're
to
not worried?
Chinese people who've been back to China and come here? They all tell you straight up that, China's playing like they're a big dog. And they are a big dog. But they're a big dog whose house is falling apart.
No way.
Falling apart.
No way.
Falling apart. When was the last time you traveled through China?
When's the last time you
people
did?
that went through China recently.
I know
and
people
they all
went
come
through China
back and
too.
tell me, like one lady was telling me about the healthcare. I was saying, oh, they're thinking about socialized healthcare. She's like, oh, yeah, we have that in China. She goes, but I was walking down the street and a guy got hit by a car literally right in front of me. The ambulance came, checked him for papers if he had insurance. He had no insurance. They just packed up and left. That country has so many problems. And
No. I'm not.
Right now, the people are afraid because they're too busy building their lives, trying to increase their wealth. But as more and more people get wealthy and more people, wake up to the world, China is going to fall apart. I'm sorry. There's no way. Everyone said that about Japan too. Japan, you remember Turning Japanese, if you please, whatever that stupid song was in the 80s. It never happened. It's not going to happen with China too. Now, will they still be a big player? Sure. They're going to be an economic powerhouse because we need somewhere to make our sneakers, and every country in the world has a vested interest in China. So
I have 2 points. I have 2 points. I have 2 points to what you're saying. First of all, I agree with you that China has a myriad of internal issues. First, I wanted to bring up the fact that we were talking about this like overreaching, surveillance states that exist around the world, and places like Israel and the United States. We sell this technology for this stuff all the time. It's funny how China actually instituted like an AI driven credit system that's constantly watching everybody.
Correct.
And the funny thing is,
your credits go low, you can't even ride a train.
That's right. But it's funny because, well, I don't know if you could. I think you can't buy houses or other stuff.
No,
like
you can't travel. You can't.
Well, yeah, you're not allowed to get a passport because you have to get passports to travel within the country.
Can't go leave the country.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, hold on a second. But the funny thing is, I watched this really great, I think it was BBC, article about how basically they were interviewing Chinese people, and actually a lot of Chinese people really love it. Now, here in the West, this idea that the surveillance, the government's going to look if I'm like jerking off too much to YouPorn or like, or you know what I'm saying, or doing whatever they do, you know what I'm saying? That's terrible. But in China, because of the level of graft and corruption that is so thoroughly embedded in their society, I mean, it's really like from top to bottom, like everything from like if you want to get a phone put in your house to like if you want to get like the food that somebody didn't spit in or actually is somewhat quality, you constantly have to pay out this graft where it starts to eat away everything, and it's this shadow economy that exists. And so there's a ton of Chinese people who really like this AI thing because what's happening is the credit score is not based on some like, oh, I know somebody, I did something, you know what I'm saying? It's not based on this idea that I have to pay somebody off to get what I want.
Oh, you don't think the government's just in the computer saying bling 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 and adding credit scores to themselves?
Listen. No, I don't.
Come on.
Because the reason I know I agree. I know what you're talking about, but I've done a lot of AI research myself. I've built a couple of different AI models for fun because I'm a dork. What I'm saying is it's very, very, it's kind of like looking at someone's brain, right? AI is very similar in how that works. It's one neuron. So the thing is, if you take out one neuron out of someone's brain, if you just got in there and said, hey, you know what, I'm gonna take that one neuron, your brain wouldn't stop working, right? It would still do exactly what it's doing now. There might be one tiny moment of fuzziness, but then the other neurons pick up for it. That's how AI works. So the thing is, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's very difficult to insert yourself into those neurons to do some kind of change. Now, I agree with you that if there is some kind of backdoor where you're just like, okay, well, we want this person to have a perfect credit rating, then you could do that. I'm sure there's ways to do that. So I'm not saying it's impossible. What I'm saying is if it's actually truly a vanilla version of AI, it would actually be very, very difficult to actually make that kind of change. Anyway, and then I had another point, but I forgot what I was going to say.
That's because you're You're talking so much through this that I'm just basically sitting here going like this.
All right, all right. Well, yeah. I mean, I, I mean, the thing is, it's interesting with with China because it's just they have like you said a myriad of issues, but at the same time, I feel like they're currently in the ascendancy. I feel like the 21st century is the women's century and the Chinese century. That's what I always call it. That's just I've said it for like the last 10 years.
Yeah, I know.
Women's
Good luck.
century.
It's not going to happen. But at the same time, who knows? The minute you think that China is the one that's going to take over the world, it'll be somebody else. And as long as the United States keeps on track, doing what it does in the way that it's always done it, which is through not a democracy, but through a constitutional, republic, we'll sit there. Okay, we weren't always number one in the world, Britain and this one and that one for a while, but they all fall apart, and we just keep on moving. And as long as we keep doing the way the right thing, the way we do it here, I don't see the United States falling to the wayside like everyone claims. You understand? If you're the banker and you lent me all this money, which is what the United States has done, is borrowed tons of money, you're not going to let me fail, because if you let me fail, you're going to fail. And that's what the United States successfully does with the world is, yeah, we borrowed money from everybody, and we owe everybody money.
It's like the devil's bargain. It's the devil's bargain.
It's the devil's bargain. And so if you let the United States fail, you're going to fail 10 times, because everything we don't have anymore, you gave us. So I don't see the United States losing out.
Okay. I mean, listen, I'm not disagreeing with you on that level. I was also going to say that, as a manufacturing base, you're right that China currently, and then Vietnam and that whole area produces a ton of different materials, and also actually tons of stuff are put together there. So even if something is manufactured, let's say in Germany, it's then sent to China, or if it's manufactured here in the United States, it's then sent to China to be put together. So I agree with you that there is a level of that. The thing is, with automation coming, and it's coming fast, I think the ability to actually and that's the one downfall for China. That's the one thing I think that if China doesn't get it right, they could actually falter real bad on that, because you could move manufacturing back to the United States. What used to take a factory load worth of people can now be done with 10% of that population, because you just have robots. Not to mention,
no, it's already like that in the car industry. I think some of the factories have 10 people in there, and when it used to be a few hundred, and now it's just 10 people, and they're basically monitoring the robots to make sure the robots are greased. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I totally understand that, and I think that'll be one of the big things for China, is whether or not they can leave the. But the problem is, so much of their country is still in such deep poverty, of their billion people, that I don't know if they'll ever be able to get out from the manufacturing, the industrial part of it, into the informational part of it fast enough. They're spending a lot of money trying to, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to.
I mean, they have
a small percentage of them might. And again, they'll try to keep tabs, sort of like the Hunger Games, on the rest of the country, while they live in the lap of luxury with technology. But how long is that going to last? It's not going to last. It'll last maybe 100 years? Okay. 100 years go by like this.
I don't know, dude. The Chinese, once again, just like the Persians, I like cultures. All around the world, and it fascinates me how different cultures do different things. The United States is a very fascinating culture in itself. Even the idea of this kind of the colonialism that turned into Manifest Destiny, that turned into this kind of once we hit the edge of California where I live, all of a sudden we turned it a different way. We were you know what, we're going to space now. Instead of being okay, we need to change our culture, we still have this kind of, and our capitalism is based on this kind of this rough and tumble idea of this rugged individualism, and hey, you know what?
It's not based on it. It's what our the Declaration of Independence and what our Constitution is all about.
It's our roots. Yeah, absolutely.
What this whole country was set up to be. It wasn't set up to be Canada. It wasn't set up to be Europe. It was set up to be the United States. That's why I'm always joking with you. Oh, if you don't like it here, you can always hop a plane to Europe and become a Polish citizen. Go for it. If that's what you
it's okay. I'm half Jewish. The Polacks, they hate the
I don't
Jews,
think
man.
they'll give a crap. The point is that
right.
You can go to Europe if you really want to live that system. But if you're going to live here, you got to live this system, and don't change the system like Bernie wants to do. We want to make it into Europe, socialism. Don't change it. This system works great for here, because it'll take a lot of people from a lot of places in the world that are failing, and it will not only make a few of them super rich, but it'll allow the rest of them to send money back to support all the other people that are starving to death that were left behind in those countries. So to destroy this system is the stupidest idea in the world.
I don't think anybody's trying to destroy anything. I think that's why I think that's, you know, I think, you know, the United States has evolved in its interpretation of what's important in the Constitution all the time, right? Even like, you know, there's a ton of things where Americans have kind of thought of different ideas, like for instance, Social Security after the Great Depression, right? Child labor laws. There's a lot of times where the United States evolved, right? There's nothing wrong with evolving and coming up with a different, like.
It is when you're taking over huge segments of the economy and giving it to the government. There's a difference between Social Security, which is taking a tiny bit out of my paycheck every time and putting it back for me. It's different than me giving the money to the government so it can decide how to spend it. That's different. That's a totally different idea.
Taxes have been part of American democracy since the day one.
Correct. It was also part of the reason why we were founded, is we didn't want to pay those damn taxes anymore. No, but the thing is, if you notice, the more the government takes of taxes, the worse things are. They claim we need more money. 10 years ago, they were like all about, oh, we need more money for the roads. The roads are in worse condition than ever. We need money for this. Every time they need more money for something, it gets worse because all they do is increase the bureaucracy, which gets hungrier and hungrier and hungrier.
I disagree. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't think. Show
me where it hasn't. Show me what's worked in government so well.
There are things that worked in government.
What? Military, instance, which is, you can say is part of government, but it's really not. It's run by military people. So it's like
I don't actually. I think,
or die.
I think
that kind of a mentality.
I think the military, what you're talking about,
is not the government.
Would be a perfect case in point about how it gets hungrier and hungrier, and more of this money.
Well, yeah, there's definitely an military industrial complex too.
Yeah.
But it gets hungry and hungry and hungrier. I don't disagree with you, but at least they spend it on things for defense. You know, they know what they're spending it.
You know, the Boeing CEO, I forget, I think he makes like $20 million a year. Why is my taxpayer money paying $20 million to the Boeing CEO? Tell me that.
Runs a multi-billion-dollar business. Why not?
Oh, really? Why? So that's not government waste? That's not a waste of money? My taxpayer dollars paying Boeing, you know, $45 million. No, $250 million for a fighter jet. I mean, I'm just saying, like, you're talking about.
And how much did it cost Boeing to develop?
But I like how you try to do that. But the military is not the government. No, it is the government, bro. The military.
I don't disagree with you that the military needs to get cut a little bit and find a better way to do things.
But they're not. They're not doing it at all. They're not doing it.
That's what your side always throws up. Oh, look at the military. The military's not doing so good either. But the rest of the government is doing even worse. They can't do anything in this country anymore. Can't build roads. They can't even keep the tolls off of the Brooklyn Bridge anymore. I mean, I think the city's subways are falling apart. Nothing government handles runs well. It just needs more and more and more, and gives you a worse and worse result every time.
I disagree.
I'm sorry. You still haven't named me something they do well.
I think that, for instance, like the FAA would be a great example that the federal government does a great job. Just recently.
Great job. So we spend trillions and trillions of dollars a year to the government so they can have an FAA, which is made up of professors.
FAA doesn't cost trillions of dollars.
And a lot of volunteer people who work in the airline industry who volunteer for these things.
The FAA gets volunteers? I don't know about that.
And look what a great job they did with these 2 Boeing flights, the FAA. They did a really
fantastic. United States of America?
That was actually the NTSB.
Did they crash here? All I'm saying is that
all they did is try to defend Boeing instead of trying to figure out what the problem is. And
once again, I'm not saying it's a perfect system. Also, the thing is, like, you know, if the problem is, so back to this privatization, right? So you're like, if we just privatize things and the government would step out of the way and
no. I never said privatize anything. No, I didn't say if we just privatize. I said
I don't understand
the whole idea of government is that you have to keep on strangling it. As long as you're continually strangling the government, it will force it to find better ways to spend its money. Yes, you have to keep on strangling it. Every time you give it $10 here, you got to pull $20 there. And then they got to justify why they need that $10 back. Because the minute you just start saying, yes, we're just going to keep shoveling it over to you, it's a bureaucracy. I mean, we know people that now work for the federal government. I mean, come on. I mean, it's like, what kind of a job is being done there? I mean, you know that, and I know.
They're doing a lot of good work, dude. They're doing a lot of good work. I think as individual Americans, we don't see the work happening all the time because when it works correctly, right? When it works correctly, we don't think like, oh, thank God it's working correctly. No, we just live our lives. When it fucks up, we notice something like the Max 8. We notice stuff that's the bad stuff because it's kind of like when you get sick. No one thinks about getting sick. No one wants to go to the doctor, but it's like when you do get sick, you're like, oh my God. Or when you sprain an ankle, that's the best example. Your ankle works perfectly. You're walking around, everything's great. All of a sudden you sprain your ankle, like, oh fuck, your ankle is so important to how I move around.
But nobody is walking around saying, Victor, I'm giving you up-teen amounts of money because you don't strain your ankle.
But you're not a government. You're not a government.
Yes, exactly. And the government just wants more and more and more. And what it does, it'll eventually eat itself and we'll either have a depression, which of course they'll try to turn around and blame it on capitalism. But the thing is, it will either have a depression or we'll get somebody so fanatically to the right that'll go in there and cut it too much. They were entry-level jobs, okay? They were for young people with no experience working in some welding company or working in some shop, okay? Nobody that went
Or
to
at a
college
McDonald's,
went to
or at a
work for a
Starbucks.
university or went to work for some big financial company and started at $15 an hour. And if they did, you would have heard about it. They didn't. This was for regular mom and pop stores and stuff like that. They were paying $10 an hour. And if you did well, over time, the boss would say, I need you. Or you would say, you know what? This is not going to sustain me. So I need to A, go get an education, B, go learn a trade, or C, go find another job doing something else where I can make a little bit more money. That's what would have happened. You didn't change anything in the system. All you did is you kicked all the young people that used to be in high school. Remember, we're in high school, we used to get jobs in the summertime. There's no more jobs in the summertime because they're $15 an hour, or maybe for students it's 12. But stores are not going to pay $12 an hour for some high school kid to come in there when they can get some Mexican guy for $8. It's just not going to happen.
Wait, so that's illegal though? That's illegal.
Listen, it is illegal, and I'll be the first one to tell you that the two sides that cause illegal immigration is, number one, the capitalists, the pure capitalists that are just looking to make their product as cheap as possible so they make money.
You know this is being recorded, right?
Else. And the second one is the socialists. The socialists want that voting bloc that will lock them down for a generation or two in the United States. So they want these people pouring across because the more dependent they can be on government,
they have to be citizens.
The more
they can't just come here and
their
vote.
children.
That's not how it works.
Their children will be
their children
and be citizens, and they will be locked into that Democrat system of welfare and votes for the rest of their lives. Okay, and I think some study came out that said the third generation actually does worse than the first generation of these immigrants these days. It's like used to be your first generation did terribly, the second generation did a little better, and the third generation was full American. Now the third generations are doing bad. They're doing worse than that first generation because at least that first generation was hungry. This third generation, they're not hungry and they're not educated. So they're nothing. So all they did is build themselves a brand new voting bloc. And everybody knows that. You can admit it, whether you want to admit it or not, that the capitalists want it for the cheap labor. And,
yes, that's 100% correct.
And the socialists want it for the voting bloc. And anybody that won't admit that is lying to themselves.
Listen,
you're lying to
but
yourself.
The thing is,
and meanwhile, all the high school students that would have gotten, they would learn a little bit about how to live in the world. I got my first job working, at a candy store, lifting boxes in the basement, and said, whew, this is some sweaty work to make, my $9 for the day. Those kids are not getting that experience anymore because nobody's going to pay them $12 to do that. So they're going to hire a Mexican guy for $6. And the Mexican guy's an adult. He's hungry because he's first generation. So only people that get hurt during this are Americans, whether they be young or be old. Don't give me the 15 living wage. That's not for the regular person.
It's not a living wage. It's not a living wage. I don't agree that it's a living wage.
It's an entry level wage. It's when you're still living at home, you should be making that money. If you're making $15 an hour, when you're in your 30s or 40s, or when you should be out of your house, you did something wrong in this world, and you need to look in the mirror and fix it. You don't blame society for that. There's no reason why anybody should be making $15 an hour. I can go on eBay and sell eBay items that I collected at a garage sale and make more than $15 an hour. So don't give me that, people are dying and they can't support themselves. No, those are people that have obviously done something completely wrong, and society needs to turn to them and say, you did something completely wrong. And now, instead of me just giving you a handout, I'm going to either tell you how you're going to fix it, or I'm going to show you how you're going to fix it. But it's up to you. You're either going to fix it, or you're going to still work for $10 an hour.
Doing that? American society's not doing that. The thing is, American society's not being like, oh, you know what? Poor you for you're only getting paid $15 an hour. You done messed up. You didn't do good in college. You didn't do this.
But when you say, is American society going to help you? What, are they going to hand you money? No, American society.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say they should hand you money. What I'm saying is, like, jobs works programs, right? Re-education.
There's job work programs in every city.
Okay. Usually they milk people, like Apex
and the people show up to collect the garbage, with the big garbage truck, and then they go back to smoking their weed and sitting in the ghetto and collecting their welfare check. Come on, you know that, and I know that.
I don't know that's the
I
case.
see them all the time wearing those orange vests,
That's
collecting
funny.
garbage. The next day they're not showing up. They got their little extra money and they're sitting at home doing nothing again, collecting their welfare until the next time they're forced to go to work. If you've hired and fired people, then you would know that there are a percentage of people that just don't want to work.
I have hired and fired people.
Okay, then you should know that there's always going to be a percentage of people that just do not want to work. You could put everything in front of them and say A, B, C, D, walk them through it 100 times. They just don't
It's usually a
want to work.
function of their intelligence. It's usually a function of intelligence. Smart people usually want to work because they
They're
understand.
not always stupid people. I'm
No,
sorry.
I didn't say always.
I fired
I'm
some
just
pretty smart people who just don't want to work.
Nah, I've met a lot of dumb people who are just lazy, dumb people who don't even try to use their brain and had to help fire them. So I know what you're talking about, but what I'm saying is that, it's also just like anyway, I mean, we could digress on this and talk about the ails of the system of that's building out. All I'm saying is that I just think that, the United States, like, it's one thing to like point out the problems and be like, oh, it should be this way or should be that way. But the thing is, for me, it's more about like, okay, so what's the solution? What are people doing? What is government doing? Because the thing is, they are supposed to be responsive. The government is supposed to kind of come up with solutions, right? It's the conglomerate of people. And the thing is,
Yeah,
I
but
feel
it's
like
not supposed to take over whole industries and whole sectors of the economy because it's supposed to come up with solutions. That's
well, if
not
there's
what the
a crisis, they
government is
should.
supposed to do.
There's a crisis,
It's not
they should.
supposed
For
to
instance,
take over a healthcare
diabetes
system
crisis.
where we have the best
Crisis.
5-year survival rate of cancer of anybody in the world, okay? And destroy it and turn it into an England system where, yeah, they have great healthcare for if you break your leg, but if you got cancer, you're dead, okay? They're not supposed to do that. They're supposed
Send me
to
an article about that.
create
I haven't
the
seen an article about
ability for people to find a new system which will work in the capitalist market. That's all they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to go in there and solve your problem. Okay?
Mhm.
That's not what the government's
except-
job is to do.
except if it goes to crisis levels, right? So the thing is, people
Well,
going
what is a
bankrupt
crisis
because
level?
people getting sick.
What level to you is a crisis level?
Well, I forget the percentage of people in the United States who have diabetes, but I think it's close to like 15%. I mean, it's a huge amount of people who have
That's
diabetes.
because we eat lots of sugar. We love our sugar.
I know, but what I'm saying, that's crisis level, right?
Okay.
So the thing is, the United States government,
The government's job
should
then is to
come
put out in out of their health and human services or whatever the hell they use, is to put out an advisory saying, because you're eating too much sugar, you're going to die. And if you choose to eat sugar in an unbelievable amount compared to the rest of the world, then you're going to die. That's all the government is supposed to
that's
do.
all they have to do, and
That's all
that's
the government
crisis
is supposed to
management.
do. Because
You know what?
anybody with a brain is supposed to say, okay, I need to slow down on sugar or it's going to kill
Listen,
me.
You know what?
Same
You know
thing
what?
with
Your
cigarettes.
house. You know what?
If you choose to smoke, which I do,
Uh-huh.
nobody is going to convince me that cigarettes is going to kill me. I know it's going to kill me. I know it'll eventually kill everybody who smokes. I choose to smoke cigarettes. Now, you could say, oh, there is an addictive component to it that's different than sugar. Though people try to come up with, oh, sugar, there's an addictive component. It's like cocaine. It's different. Point is, you could say that and say, okay, well, because there's an addictive component to it, we're going to go a little bit further. We're going to send you those patches that I call for. Once every 2 years, you call the number and they send you these patches. You slap them on your arm and then you smoke cigarettes while the patches are going. And now you're double
Extra
high.
nicotine, baby. Yeah.
Yes. You can get those patches. They can go a little further and say, okay, here's some stop smoking lozenges, to help you. Okay, they went a little further because it's an addictive substance. But that's it. I do not expect the government to come in and save me because I decided to smoke. I don't expect the government to come in and
You know what's hilarious? You proved your own argument against your own argument. You know why? Because the only reason you know that cigarettes are harmful to your health is because the government chose to spend millions of dollars on research to prove and to hold people accountable. And the thing is, the very idea that the knowledge that you have is based on that. And the fact that you're kind of like, oh,
everybody knew it. I know people in their
That's
80s
bullshit.
that back in the 40s, they were telling, their mother turned to them and said, you're going to get cancer, stop smoking. So they quit smoking. Yeah, I know people who are very old who stopped smoking back in the 50s and the 60s
Okay.
because they knew that it was going to kill you way before the government came out with any studies. Those studies was about the government getting control, getting tax dollars. They started taxing cigarettes to huge amounts and making so much money off of it. Now they got those corporations by the balls, and now they start out putting out stuff that everybody knew already. There's nobody that did not know before 1970 that smoking a cigarette wasn't going to give you lung cancer. There wasn't a single person in this country. Now, was there some educated guy who was sitting there going, yeah.
That's hyperbole. That's hyperbole.
What'd you say?
I said that's hyperbole.
It's not hyperbole. I knew the old people like that who were smoking Chesterfield Kings and said, "Oh,
you mean you know, like one or two people who
had, and they
but
chose
the majority of
Americans
did not know that.
And they didn't end up dying of lung cancer. No, they didn't end up dying of lung cancer. They ended up dying of other things. But the point is that they chose to smoke. I choose to smoke. Even with all those studies out there, I'm still smoking. I still know a lot of people that smoke. So what?
I'm not saying that people shouldn't have the right to do what they want to do, including,
not
eating
the government's
sugar,
job,
smoking cigarettes, smoking marijuana. Absolutely, it's not the government's job. What I'm saying is that earlier we were talking about healthcare, and you said, hey, for people who have pre-existing conditions, and the thing is, the government should come in for those people because the market will not bear out in the benefit for those people. It'd actually be terrible for them. And the thing is, the price will be crazy. Well, if the government, that's the purpose of government. So I totally get that, and it makes sense. So diabetes, which is a huge issue in the United States, not in the United States, the world. The American government could come and, for instance, nationalize, the production of insulin. Right? It can do things to actually facilitate the crazy decrease in cost, and at the same time educate future generations about the sugar issue.
Cheap insulin is.
I know, and they charge crazy amounts of money of it.
No, but your health insurance does, but not.
Yes.
You can get, there are a million programs to get insulin cheap. That's not true. What you're saying is not true. And yes, if you get diabetes, okay, and you
how about healing it? How about actually like curing diabetes? Because there are people working on that. Science right now working on curing diabetes. But you know why they don't want to cure diabetes? Is because it's way too.
Because they're making too much money. That's the argument. There would never be an advance for anything if you followed that. That's such baloney. And it's not the government, because of the government.
I didn't say it's
because of the government that we found all these advances. I'm sorry to tell you. The reason why we found all these advances is because, yes, this company says, I don't want to fix it because I'm making so much money. But there comes along another guy who says, you know what? If I fix that, I'll make a lot of money.
No,
so
bullshit.
He then develops it.
You know what I call bullshit?
It happens every time.
It's called the
Listen, I have to use the bathroom.
Because they figured it out probably.
2 minutes. I have to use the bathroom. Unless you want me to take the camera in there and you can watch me pee.
No, that's good. It's good. I don't have it doesn't come with a microscope, so it's not good.
Tweezers and a microscope. Hold on. Last thing I want to say is somebody very smart. Are you there? Because you locked up on me.
I'm here now.
Nope, you're locked up on my screen.
Hold on, maybe it's taking a second. Am I back already?
Now you're back.
Okay.
Now you're back.
Okay, last thing I want to say.
Somebody very smart. My wife just said the difference between the way you think and I think is that you think about rights. You think about it's my right to this. It's right. It's the right thing. I think about responsibility. I think with that right comes a responsibility. Yes, not all the time is it a pleasant responsibility. Sometimes you have to learn that the hard way in life, that not everything comes with just a right. It comes with a responsibility too. And part of what makes
like going to the dentist,
in my mind work well is, yes, we have rights. And with those rights comes a responsibility. And you come at it from one angle only of, it's my right, we have a right to this. And I come with it with, we have a responsibility with that right to do this and to do the right thing. And even if it's detrimental, sometimes you have to do the right thing. So we just come at it at different angles. But at the same time, nobody wants a guy with diabetes to die. There's a whole system set up in this country to treat people with diabetes.
Totally.
People are researching it every day. And you know who will probably find a cure for diabetes? Us, not those socialized systems, us. Because we have a profit motive in our system.
I disagree.
Finds it.
Can I point out one thing? In Cuba, right now there is, I forgot what it's called. It's called like
I don't
medical
want to hear
turf.
about Cuba. You know what? I can give you a million stories about Cuba, how wonderful it is, and then in reality, none of it's like that.
No,
Okay,
no. What?
it's
Okay,
just what
okay.
they
But
say.
hold on. Let me just finish. Let me finish.
Go ahead.
It works. It's proven. They have a lung cancer vaccine that they give because there's a shit ton of people who smoke in Cuba. It's a big thing in Cuba, and the efficiency of this vaccine is amazing. It is truly fantastic how little people get lung cancer. Now, cigarettes in general cause tons of different kinds of cancers, lung cancer just being one of the many, which is the more prevalent one that people know about because it's literally you're putting tar in your lungs. But what I'm saying is that they had a socialized system. They had people who solved problems. I listen. I agree with you that like you know you're right about the extremes. The extreme idea that you're only going to have socialized medicine and that you're not going to have some kind of other system built in to actually get people motivated to do the research, to do like 20 hours worth of work every day, because you're a scientist and you're trying to figure this shit out and you're not just doing it for altruistic reasons, right? I agree with you that you need both sides. So you definitely want the other side. I'm just saying that like the role of government itself is to be responsive to the people, and the criteria for that responsibility is this idea that there's a threshold of a crisis, and when you have crisis, that's when government's supposed to do stuff. And so diabetes is a crisis, right? Natural disasters, there's a crisis. We all agree that the government should come in and help people whose houses burned down in California, or whose houses got flooded during
Okay,
Hurricane
but
Sandy in
does
New
the
York.
government have a responsibility to come in and rebuild those houses? And then you rebuild those houses and they burn down again 10 years later? And then they come in again and save you and then they burn those houses down. Like when does the responsibility come in? Like
No,
when
no, that's
does
a
it
good point. That's a good
when
point.
does it, I live very close to big McMansions over here. They were
Yeah.
all destroyed. They were all moving into this part of the neighborhood where it's high up on higher ground and smaller houses. They're all living here renting and they couldn't wait to move back to their McMansion. All they did is rebuild their McMansion, so the next storm that comes is going to destroy it. When does the responsibility come into effect of, okay, the government is there to take care of you when there's a disaster, but now you have a responsibility to make sure that they don't have to come back and save you again.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And the thing is, especially in particular places like in the Midwest, there's all these flood zones where they're like, "Oh, we're just gonna build our house back in this flood zone." And you're like, "Wait a second, the storm literally just washed away everything you had, and now you're like, oh, well, it's a flood zone." And even places like Florida, which is a great example, where they're in fucking hurricane land, they don't hurricane-proof their houses to the point where Floridians are known to say, "Well, everything I have in my house is disposable, so I can leave, and then the insurance is just going to pay for everything, and the government's going to get subsidized the repayment."
Okay, but
I completely
that's when
agree.
the
Where's the
government has to
responsibility?
step in, the federal government has to step in and say, okay, no more. If you want
Yeah,
to continue to live in this area, you need to form a local government where you'll pay for your own problems because you're creating your own problems now.
totally.
It's one thing to first time to step in if there's a crisis and try to help solve it by pumping a lot of money or research into it. Fine. But the second time, the third time, pick a time. Like, is the fifth time maybe enough to say, okay, you know what? The next time there's another hurricane in New Orleans, because their monster pumps don't work. I don't know if you've ever been there, but they have
No,
huge
I've never
monster
seen the
pumps.
pumps.
Did you take
Right.
the tour and see the monster pumps that they
No,
take
I was too busy getting
by big
drunk.
puncher
Too busy
trains?
getting drunk. I was too
It's
busy drinking
absolutely,
on the streets. It's great.
yeah. Oh, okay. So was I. I was projectile vomiting my hand grenade drink at 4 o'clock in the
Hey, you
morning.
know what? If listen, if you drank all the colors of the rainbow, it's probably not a good idea.
No, I suppose they
It's gonna
told me
come
when I
out
had
in a
the
rainbow.
first one, here, drink only one. And I was like, oh, this is good. Can I have another one? Okay. And next thing you know, by the fourth one, I literally was projectile vomiting all the way back to the hotel.
Anyway,
Like,
let's change the subject. Let's change it back, because we were gonna mix it up a little bit. So okay, so how about you send me this article about the Amazon Echo, listening in and people actually listening to full conversations, right? Which is kind of like, that's why I don't own one of those things. I do have an Apple iPhone, which honestly, whenever I say, "Hey Siri," my phone's gonna like literally. It didn't do it now, but usually it'll be like, "Oh, hey Ben." I even made it into like a British guy, so I could pretend it's Alfred from Batman because I think it's hilarious. Um, so it's like a British guy being like, "Hello Ben, let me get you what you need." But you know, it's funny because I think also the fact that like Amazon and other giant corporations, they're paying less taxes than they've ever paid before. So it's funny because I just feel like there's this weird, you know, it's strange because we're talking about like government's role and like what we both, we consider like the responsibilities of individuals. I think it's funny that we kind of like weirdly give corporations a pass on their responsibility, because we're talking about responsibility, and I feel like all of a sudden, like Americans are just, and then also politicians are just like, well, we need to let the free market capitalism do its thing, and we don't want to impede them in any way, or we don't want to stop them. It's like those people who are like lauding Apple for not opening the phone for the FBI. The FBI is like, hey, listen, open this phone for us, and then like they're like, thank God Apple didn't open the phone. It's like, what? Wait a second. This is the government. We're not. The government is supposed to be above corporations, in my opinion. This is my philosophy. Like, not that they should own the corporations, but like they should be beholden to government, because you can't regulate somebody who's not beholden to you, right? What do you think?
No, some of these corporations today have become bigger than some governments. They have more money than some world governments. So I totally understand that, but at the same time, the government created the legal terminology for someone to check that box and say, I agree to the terms and conditions of this thing. You know what I'm saying? People agreed to it's not like they just went and they spied on you because they just decided to spy on you. Though I do believe that they could possibly even, like, if you have a camera, like I heard that there's like camera, if you have a camera in your TV or camera in your computer, your laptop, that people can actually literally come in and see what you're doing without you even knowing. Besides the Amazon.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have I been online and I'll search something, and the next thing you know, I'm getting phone calls,
trying to
telling me that this product, or suddenly I'm cruising online and I'm on eBay, which is a totally different site, and next thing you know, it's trying to sell me these items. It's very strange how that works. I do agree with that. And in a society where we have civil liberties, they are trampling on those civil liberties, and they will trample on them if there's a profit to be made. They'll figure out the algorithms to sell you items, to make money. And yes, government does have a role to either break up when they become too big, those companies, or to make common sense regulations. The problem is that those companies, though they don't pay any taxes, they pay so much money to those politicians on both sides,
and the lobbyists who they hire,
and the lobbyists, that they're not beholden to anybody anymore. I totally agree with you. Now, maybe that's the future. Maybe the future is a corporation. The Dutch way. What was it? The Dutch India company,
trading company.
They ended up discovering, settling most of the world and stuff, like, taking over most of the world. Yeah, maybe that is the future of society. That's a possibility. I don't know, but I do know that in this country, with civil liberties and with rights and with responsibilities, I do think that corporations have gone a little far. Some of them, especially in the IT world, in trying to control people's lives, and I do believe that. I mean, but at the same time, I check that box. I have my Facebook account. I have my Microsoft account. I have my Skype account. I check those terms and conditions. They could be recording this right now with their AIs and picking out what they want from it, or whether it's good or not.
Yeah.
And also, they get to ban speech.
I wonder if they made you a white nationalist yet.
Yeah, exactly. But they've done that to people that are not white nationalists.
Yeah, absolutely.
People off of YouTube, who are making millions of dollars just selling their ideas. They weren't selling an actual physical thing. They're selling ideas. You might not like the ideas. Turn the channel. But what they've done is they've literally blocked these people because they see those people as a threat to themselves. Because if people do believe in individual freedom, more and more, that's bad for those IT companies, because the whole idea of the internet is everything is connected. So that's just a guarantee that they're not going to like that way of thinking. But they're now starting to literally ban people for that, and that's a scary thought.
Well, also the thing is, for me, I think that, like, when we were talking about, you're talking about responsibilities versus rights, and I think, like, corporations have assumed the rights of people, because they have on many levels. And so the thing is, like, they should also have the responsibilities of people, right? So the thing is, like, you and I, we pay taxes for tolls, for roads, for schools, for all this other stuff. And the fact that some of these companies get away with paying almost no taxes is ridiculous, in my opinion, because it's like, well, if you're gonna take this side of it, which I don't agree with, but if you're gonna take that side, then you should be paying out on this other side. And I feel like I mean, what's also annoying to me is it's just like they already have found all the loopholes already, right? So the thing is, like, 5, 10, 15 years ago, they were already loopholed through the roof. They got, like, literally teams of accountants and finance people to figure out all the loopholes. And now the loopholes have all been so utilized and fulfilled that they've managed to say, hey, you know what? What we're going to do now is go into government and change it so we could pay even less. So now before it was like, okay, we're kind of reacting to the situation and figuring out how to loophole through the situation. Now it's like, hey, we're going to go in front of the situation before it's even law and change that. And I think it's mind blowing. I mean, it's like, and the thing is, what's crazy is, what I always, once again, I love the hypocrisy of it all, is that most of these CEOs, most of these people running these companies, they're Democrats. Like that's the funny thing. The people who paid for Hillary Clinton speeches and things like that. And that's why I like the progressive movement. I know you don't necessarily agree with them, but the thing is, it's just like they pointed out, they're constantly pointing that out, and Democrats hate it because they get so upset because they're just like, well, how could you possibly talk negative about these people who are helping us? It's like, are they really helping you? Are they really? Because what they're doing is just infusing themselves into these situations. Anyway, I just think it's kind of ridiculous.
No, I don't disagree with you. Most of these people that run these big companies, yeah, they are left of center. I'm sorry, they are left of center. And it's like, it's so strange because the media, the way the media portrays it is that business is conservative. But you know what? I would tell you today, I think the people that are most interested in personal rights and responsibility are the conservatives, not the liberals. The liberals are more about bureaucracy and more about control of the public, mass public. Conservatives are more about the individual and liberties. Look at the ACLU. The ACLU defended a Nazi marching through Skokie or whatever that area was. Today, they come out and say right away that no, we're not supporting the right to speak of a Trump supporter. We're not supporting the right to speak of this right of center person. It's amazing how all of these institutions that at one time left of center was all about the individual and their rights, it now have become about the group. It's become about group politics. It's about making everything homogenous. And the conservatives that wanted everything to be homogeneously conservative now are about the individual. The pendulum has definitely swung totally in the other direction. When I listen to left of center, people talk on TV, it's always about the group identity. When I listen to conservatives talk, it's always about the individual. It's always about the individual right.
Well, that's why that's why I like listening to, like,
companies are not about the individual. Those companies don't care about the individual. And those companies, I do agree, I hear a lot of times, even on the right, I'll hear people say, oh, business, government has to leave them alone. Yes, government has to leave them alone until they get to a point where they're starting to tell the government what to do. And the government being the people. It's not that I care that they tell Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump what's going to be. I care when they start telling me what's going to be and what I can and can't say or think. No matter how right or how wrong it is, you have no right to tell me what I'm supposed to do. You're there to be my utility, not there to control what I can have and not can have.
Or also, the thing is, here in the Bay, these companies like carve out their own little fiefdoms of monopolies, right? So the thing is, it's impossible not to, like, for instance, Comcast in the Bay Area, like, it's almost impossible to get internet. And then it's like, you're like, wait a second, why am I paying $120 for shitty internet service? Like, why am I getting bilked? And the thing is, what they do is they create these rules and regulations to completely stop actual real competition. And that's the thing. I'm like, and that's why on the right,
but they do it with government's help, because government gets all those excise fees and taxes. Like, they'll tell you, oh, you're only paying $69 a month, and then you get your bill and it's $140 a month, and you're like, you said it was $60. Well, those are government taxes and fees. And if you read through those taxes and fees, you can see that they are now in bed with the government, and the government's not there whether it be local or state or federal, they're not there anymore for the individual. They're there for the group. They're there to feed themselves so they can create more dependency on themselves. Like, I'm surprised you don't see that. Like, a lot of times when you talk, I say to myself, you should be thinking more conservatively than progressive. Progressive is all about group identity. It's all about
I disagree.
Divide and conquer groups.
No, I don't think it's, the thing is, I think progressive politics is more about kind of like, coming to understand that, like, the role of government is to actually have compassionate, responsive
government, dude. It's not. No. It's not a person.
No, government can be compassionate. That when FEMA comes and gives people a bunch of trailers to live in, that's compassion.
It's not your mommy. It's the government.
I never said it should be your mommy.
It's there to fight wars.
So we've already been talking for over an hour, and it'll be like, we're close to an hour and a half. So how about we just talk about some science stuff, just to finish off with some science, because that's what we were planning on doing.
SpaceX launch another one.
Well, those were cool. I mean, did you watch the triple landing? That was pretty sick.
Yes.
I mean, you know what I think is kind of ridiculous is the fact that why did it take this guy to figure out, hey, maybe we should reuse some of this stuff?
Well, they did reuse the boosters on the space shuttle.
Did they reuse those? I thought they just fell into the ocean.
No, they fell in the ocean and they refurbished just the little skinny ones.
The skinny
Not the big tank in the middle.
Yeah. All right. I guess maybe if they were actually, I just feel like it's kind of like, people who use like things as like single use. Like, they're like, oh, I'm going to use.
But why is it being used better? Because it's a private company and they're trying to save money.
It's true.
If I can reuse something 3 times, I'm going to save a lot of money. If I'm the federal government, I can just burn as much as I want, shoot it into outer space, and let it fall into the ocean.
Did you know they can't even get back to the moon right now because they threw away all that stuff that they had to get to the moon? I'm not kidding.
Should.
They threw away all the stuff that instead of actually storing it, they were like,
what though?
Like the original materials they used, the actual telemetric data, for instance, they erased them and overwrote them, like from actually getting to the moon. Instead of actually saving that data, they actually overwrote them with other information later on other trips to space, not to the moon. I mean, talk about like a ridiculous nonsense. The conspiracy people, they always talk about it as in like, the government is they didn't go to the moon, so that's why they have to cover their tracks, which I think is the most ridiculous bullshit ever. I just think it's just like, somebody in the 70s and 80s was like, oh, look, the government's not wasting so much money. Well, look, we're reusing stuff, even though like 70s technology being reused in the 80s and 90s is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life.
Anyway. My cell phone has more computing power than the first freaking rocket to the moon.
Yeah, exactly. But for some things though, like the data that they collect, that stuff could be reused because then you punch it into like if you punch that data into my cell phone, I can figure out the trajectory.
Okay, but I'm sure the Israelis figured out how not to land on the moon now, so we could use that.
That was the other one. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. Like, it sucks. What do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Because I love space exploration. I think we should be doing more of it as humans. Just because we're gonna, the Earth has finite resources and we have billions and billions and billions of people.
Finite resources, use it all. So we need to get some electric cars.
I didn't say electric cars.
Honey, I want to watch the news tonight, but the wind's not blowing.
That's the most ridiculous.
He is great.
That is the most. Anybody who believes that, they got to be so stupid. I mean, you got
not blowing. We can't watch TV tonight, honey. Anyway, point is, yes, I do think it's great. I think the NASA, the way they are structuring it now, where they're pushing it more towards corporations to do these, because the only thing that's, why did people come to the New World? Because they wanted gold. They didn't come here. Yeah, they came here to spread Jesus. I get that as well. That's a motivation. But there's no Jesus on the moon. You know what I'm saying?
There might be aliens up there who could be converted.
There's no aliens, not in this galaxy that we believe.
Well, not in this solar system.
Solar system, I mean. So the only reason to go to space really right now, because I mean, yeah, I get it. In 3 billion years, maybe we'll say, okay, we got 1 billion years left to get to the moon. Yeah. We got 3 billion years. So the only motive for going into outer space right now is for resources. Because, yeah, You know what? If I can, on that like Alaska show where they have those gold miners, whatever the hell that name of that show is, these guys dig up these huge tracts of land to find like, a cup of gold, and you laugh through the whole season. Yeah, okay, if I can go to an asteroid and find a bunch of gold, in one shot, or nickel, or cadmium, or all these other items.
Actually, the reason they're going to the moon, and actually China and the United States are going to the moon, is because of helium-3.
Three.
Because helium-3 slams into the moon from the sun and actually is basically moon dust is helium-3. And helium is actually an inert gas. So inert gas means basically like it's not going to react with anything. So helium-3 actually they think could actually be used as a fuel source itself. So the moon itself might actually be a great like, you know, you might be able to fuel space rockets with helium-3 and then go get gold. Like imagine finding a giant asteroid that's filled
Unless the wind's not blowing. In that case, can't get to the moon.
You know, honestly, I really think a windmill-powered spaceship would be the most badass thing. Unfortunately, there's no wind in space, so I don't think it would work.
Oh no, we'll just take a lot of wind out of Ocasio-Cortez, and she'll just blow him to the moon.
You know, I love how she's become like this.
Because she's so stupid. She's not stupid woman.
Yeah, she's stupider than Trump.
Oh yeah, because Trump he at least amassed billions of dollars and hired thousands.
Oh, he didn't amass anything.
He screwed 10%.
And daddy
I heard all the arguments, but the point is, at least Trump built something. There are buildings with his name on it. But you got this girl from the Bronx who was a barista whose ideas put her friggin' coffee shop out of business. Do you know the coffee shop she worked at is out of business now because they raised the minimum wage? So the place couldn't afford to stay open anymore, and now it's shut down. So like she put her business that she was in before she became a politician.
Are you sure? Are you sure that's the reason they went out of business? I mean, because the thing is, it's easy to say, oh, they went out of business for that reason, but maybe they were mismanaged. Right? She only worked there as an employee.
They hired her. They got to be mismanaged.
She seems like a nice person. She seems like she'd be cool to make my coffee. She seems very personable. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying. I feel like people put those stories.
She's become the poster child for the left, just like Trump is the poster child for the right. I totally agree.
And yeah, she's like a lightning rod. So
you got to admit, Trump is funny. I mean, Trump, he knows how to speak.
I don't like his humor. I think he's ridiculous.
His humor
is asinine, dude. He's so childish.
It's hilarious.
Really? It's not
Pencil neck Adam Schiff.
Personally, I don't think that's funny. I like Lion Ted Cruz better. That was
Lion Ted Cruz was awesome as he needed it. Now I love Ted Cruz. You know what I mean? Same thing with Assange. It was like I hate Julian Assange. Oh, I love Julian Assange. And now he's like, I don't even know Julian Assange.
It's not my deal. That's what he said. It's not my deal. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Back onto science. I think that traveling to the moon, traveling to the other parts of the solar system, I don't think we should be having humans doing it. I think we should be sending robots. I think you can get 10 times more done not sending people, because you got to keep these bags of fat and blood alive, all the way. Meanwhile, you don't need to do that with a robot.
You're saying the Earth Aquarium is good enough for us to stay here?
Yes, until we find another aquarium to dip ourselves into, then fine. Or we amass enough resources to build ourselves another Earth Aquarium somewhere else. It's going to be the robots that do it for us.
And they're doing it. And they're doing it right now.
And guess what? You want to add VR to it so some geek at home can sit there with his VR headset and feel like he's actually on Mars? Then fine, add that to it. Because that's a hell of a lot cheaper than sending bags of fat out into space. Keeping them alive, seeing
painfully too. Painfully alive. Painfully alive. But right, because painfully alive. They did that research study on the Kelly brothers, right?
Yeah.
Was it Scott Kelly and his brother?
Scott Kelly and
Kelly. I mean, the pain he went through in his, I mean, it was just, I read some of the stuff, like the swelling and the rashes that he got after he came back. I mean, it was just like horrific. I was like, God, like who would want to volunteer for that?
Well, because we're built for 1G. I mean, we're built for Earth. We're not built for floating. You love to float in the bathtub, but if you float in the bathtub every day, you're going to have problems.
Or you'll turn into a whale.
Or over time, you'll turn into a whale. Yes, and it'll be the robots that will genetically engineer you to become a whale quickly. Yeah. Other than that, you're not gonna do well in space. Now, that doesn't mean in the future, once the robots have discovered everything and amassed all the stuff we need, we can't build things out there because now maybe, like right now, I do think we should be sending humans into lower Earth orbit. I think we should be building a space station like as a hotel because there's nothing wrong with that. There's a profit motive there that will drive the industry. People are willing to pay to go to space.
Yeah, there's actually a pretty cool hotel idea. I'll send you the link. It's actually pretty sweet. The guy has like a YouTube channel and everything, and he's trying to get investors. It's pretty fascinating. It's just kind of like a giant wheel, and then
and it should be because if the wheel turns, you can create artificial gravity,
and everything is on the edge of the wheel.
Yeah.
So and then it basically so you're being thrown against the edge of it. So that's true. I also
Space
think
Odyssey 2001 or whatever.
I also think that the new scientific research that's being done, by the Chinese in particular, they're doing a lot of research on communications using the spooky action at distance. You know what that is, right? Where like two particles get entangled. So one particle has like an upspin and the other one has a downspin. And when you change the spin, the other one instantaneously, no matter the distance, will change the spin as well, right? So if you think about that, that's like a 0 and 1 situation, right? So the Chinese have, I believe, like almost a year ago now, they were using a satellite in space because there's no way to capture that because it's a non-local change, right? So the thing is when you do radio waves, the radio wave has to actually travel through space to get from point A to point B versus this thing is a non-local situation. So there's no way to intercept the communication. I mean, it's not encrypted. It just doesn't exist anywhere else for you to pick up the change.
Other than those two locations.
Yeah, exactly. So you actually have to be looking at that particular thing. And the thing is, for me right now, it's just like, like radio, right? Back in, Marconi, or was it Marconi, the Italian guy who came up with radio originally, right? He like, the radio was like this thing that was like, it was nothing like we have now. But that technology has led us to where we are right now, where you and I are now bullshitting across thousands of miles live with lots of color. You could hear me spitting. You could basically we're almost in the same room of, what I mean, because of it. And so my point is that I feel like what you're talking about with the robots, and if you add that element of instantaneous communication over vast distances, right? So the thing is, imagine you had that kind of communication on all the way to like Saturn or Jupiter, so that there would be no lag time, right? There would be no, I got to wait till the satellite gets into like place, So I think scientists are working on that real hard, and that's the reason why. I think it's because you're right. I think in the end they realize like sending humans, not to mention humans have finite lives, right? To hit the edge of the solar system is going to take like 70 years, right? So the thing is, you'll be dead by the time. What are you going to have kids on the spaceship during the time who are going to be forced to work?
It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah,
well, actually, the faster you go, for us it'll be 70 years, but for the people it won't actually.
You're right.
You know what I'm saying? They'll be able to go to another star system in another one lifetime. But the thing is, for us, if they ever decide to come back, it'd be like hundreds of years went by.
Yeah.
And I understand that. But at the same time, the problem is that too many people read these sci-fi books and they want us to be at the, in the teleportation stage instead of the communicator stage. And we're at the communicator stage. We just developed the Samsung Galaxy 10 whatever, and the Apple whatever X, has just brought us the communicator from Star Trek, not the dilithium crystals, and
not the supercomputer, yet.
No, none of that stuff. So until people want to be at that point without thinking about what makes sense in the near term, and if NASA needs to focus on privatizing themselves, not everything. I understand there is a need for NASA. We do need government spending money up there to develop, satellites to protect us and missiles to
the problem
knock out the Russian missiles.
Edge science is prohibitively expensive. The Chinese government is spending, the equivalent of billions of dollars on this kind of technology to communicate over vast distances using this spooky accent at a distance. And the thing is, like, that's what Einstein called it. It's called quantum entanglement. That's the real scientific name. But the thing is, like, layman people don't have just billions of dollars. Most companies don't just have billions of dollars that they can.
But 50 years ago, you would have said that about the space program.
No, it's true. It's true.
Regular people cannot do this, go travel out to outer space and deliver stuff. It has to be a government.
Totally.
But luckily, government here in this country, the reason why our space agency is so successful is, yeah, we had some great things that cost a lot of money, but we threw them out and lost the data to give the power to the corporation, to the people, because people own corporations in the end. It's run by shareholders. So listen, if the guy in his backyard could develop a way to travel into outer space, the more power to him. But it's going to take corporations with a profit motive to go into outer space.
Well, and
And
resources are the number one profit motive,
yes, one
right?
of them is space tourism. Because I would pay, if I could somehow save up $125,000, I'd travel to outer space.
You would do that? You go up there?
I would definitely.
I just feel like it would just be a purely vomiting trip for me. I feel like I would just be
Oh, definitely. I'd be throwing up the whole way there, sick as a dog, feeling like crap. Oh yeah, but you know what? I went to outer space, so I would do it if I had the money. Point is, there's a lot of people who think like that.
Isn't there a SpaceX guy like that? There's like some Japanese guy, right? Didn't he buy like a ticket to the moon?
Yeah. Actually, Reagan owns a crater on the moon or something. I went onto that website when she was born, and I bought her a crater on the moon. So she has a little piece of land. Yeah.
She could go
One of the craters on the moon is Reagan's.
Put the flag down.
I don't even know where that paper is anymore. So I had to have that deed,
Yeah. If you don't get the deed, you don't own it, right? I mean,
yeah. Without showing the deed that I bought it, before that other person settled there, I lose. But my point is, listen, it was just for Reagan to have, for a little kid to say, "Ooh, I own a piece of the moon." I don't even know where the damn crater is. For all I know, it's on the Russian side.
You'd be like, "Vad is Lasglas?"
Yeah, be like, "Oh, I'm here." No, we don't want you. What do you want? What do you want?
Yeah. I mean, United States did plant its flag on the moon, so doesn't that mean we own it all?
Well, yes, we did, but it turned white, so we surrendered.
We also signed a treaty that says no one gets to own the moon. So the whole world. Well, it's just like Antarctica. No one's allowed to own Antarctica, right?
What happened?
And the same as Antarctica. No one's allowed to own Antarctica.
Yeah. Or the Arctic, all that stuff. I understand. Nobody really wants to. If there's money to be made on the moon, somebody's going to want to own the moon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's why, for the resources thing, I think that's why, Mars is such a promising idea, not necessarily for like living habit wise, but the thing is, if you're going to process like ore or stuff in space, right? Like from an asteroid, the best thing to do is to bring that asteroid not close to Earth, because that shit hits Earth, it could cause some serious damage. But Mars is a dead planet. So if you brought that close to Mars, mine the shit out of it, and then you could use it as a launching pad to send it back to Earth. So it could basically be like a giant mining facility for Earth.
I think Venus is where you should bring it, because Venus has doesn't it have lakes of methane and all of that stuff? So it's like you have power right there sitting at your fingertips.
Yeah, but it's so hot there, right? Isn't it like crazy?
But so every factory's hot. It's going to be robots working there, not Mexicans.
All right. I mean, I'm just saying, like Mars, at least it's like, it's also, also you don't have
Mexican robots.
It's also going to be a lot of power, a lot of power to escape the sun's gravity at Venus versus Mars. Mars is closer to us, but Venus is closer to the sun, right? So, the sun's gravity is stronger the closer you get to the sun, right? So the amount of energy you have. Yes, of course. That's how gravity works.
It's in the habitable zone, so it's in the same zone as we're in.
It's Venus is not in the habitable zone.
Venus is in the habitable zone, and that's why people wonder why. I'm not talking Mercury. I'm talking Venus. Venus is the Earth that went to greenhouse, and Mars is the Earth that didn't make it even halfway to greenhouse, and the Earth is just right. Venus is, you can Google it. Google whether or not Venus is in the sun's habitable zone. It is, I believe.
All right. I mean, I never heard that before, but look it up.
Don't you have? I use Bixby. You use the other one, right?
No. See, it says it's not. According to this one website, it says, in the same way that habitable zone is the region around a star where planets similar to Earth could have liquid water on the surface, the Venus zone is the region around a star where the atmosphere of the planet, like Earth, would likely be pushed into a runaway greenhouse, producing surface conditions similar to Venus. So, but so I don't think it's in actually the habitable zone, which is fine. All I'm saying is that it's not about the habitable zone.
Is Venus in the sun's habitable zone?
It's like, What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, because I always heard that it was.
Go back to Game of Thrones, nerd. That's what we like. He like answers. Anyway, are you a Game of Thrones fan?
Yes, I did like the first couple of seasons. I got a little bored with it, but I'm excited to see what the ending is, you know? I know he
True.
changed the books, so we'll see what happens.
True. Anyway, my point about it is that the closer you get to something, the higher the gravitational effect. I believe it's inversely like 1/4, or what was
See,
it?
it
Like,
says here that Venus and Mars are also in the habitable zone, but aren't currently habitable.
okay, I've
It's
never
in the
heard that Venus.
Goldilocks zone.
Oh, the Goldilocks zone. Okay, all right. I mean, I just don't think that, Anyway, my point about it is that this being closer to the sun, you have to spend more energy to move away from the sun, which would be moving towards Earth, right? Because the gravity from the sun is every time you get gravity
I know
works
you're
like that.
climbing out of a gravity well from
Yeah,
the sun.
exactly, exactly. So, and the gravity well here is a lot less. So if we go towards Mars, it's about the same, right? Isn't Mars a little farther away from the sun, if I remember correctly, than Earth? I forget. Earth is the third planet, so Mars is the fourth planet, right?
Mars is the fourth planet.
Yeah, yeah. So the thing is, so we're actually like escaping the gravity well, but then going back from Mars to Earth is
I
actually
know, but
should be.
does Mars have something that can create power?
Well, they found methane
Fuel.
there. They found methane in Mars. They did. And that's why they think there might be life there still now, potentially. Look it up. I'm
Well,
not kidding. They found these weird plumes of methane all over Mars, and they're not sure. Also, there's a bunch of research that shows that Mars might have had like rivers more recently. There's a bunch of stuff that's come out about Mars in the last like 2 or 3 months that could be like a whole podcast on its own, just because it's like, So anyway, but yeah, I mean, I just think that Mars also is like the fact that you could send some people there, right? So you don't have to have an army of people working on Mars, but like, somebody's got to fix the robots every once in a while. Even if you have this telepresence robot, it's still good to have people, just like in the factories we were talking about earlier. You still need a population of people to do stuff. So Venus would be very uninhabitable for people to go there.
that's
Versus
true. You'd be
Mars,
crushed.
you'd be crushed. But versus Mars, you go there, I feel like it would be more doable, Anyway, but we'll see. Honestly, I don't think the Earth is running out of resources currently, that badly, so we don't really need the resources. But
No.
but at the same time, if you found an asteroid that had like $1 trillion worth of gold on it, or you found an asteroid that had $1 trillion worth of other materials, like
You crashed the gold market.
yeah, you crash the gold market, but also like it could revolutionize the way we live on Earth. Like we could have like gold toilet, but like everybody has like a gold toilet.
We all beat Trump with our gold toilet.
Yeah, yeah, we would just have like fucking gold everything because they're like, that's not real gold, that's asteroid gold. Like people would be like, that's not Earth gold, that's asteroid gold. It's not the same thing.
Asteroid gold. I sit
Yeah.
only on asteroid gold. Just so you
Oh,
know.
oh, good.
No,
Good.
I told you, but there's a lot of other things too. Like, it's important that you develop just for the Earth. I mean, climate change, baloney. Okay, it's
I know we didn't even touch on that yet.
we're not going to
Some other
touch
time.
on that because
Some other
that's
time.
too
Some
much of
other
a
time.
hop. Does humans polluting the Earth cause the Earth to change? I'm sure it does. Is the Earth in danger of dying in 12 years? No, it's not going to die in 12 years. It was a lot dirtier in the beginning of the century than it is now. So it's not going to die in 12 years.
It's funny. It's actually I read this. I read this one.
There's more greenery on the Earth now than there ever was before since the Cambrian explosion or something. The Earth is greening, if anything. You know that,
Well,
right?
well. I mean, it makes sense that there would be more plants because plants love CO2, and we're producing more CO2, so you would be like more thriving. So I could see that. I don't necessarily agree with you though, because I didn't actually read the research on that, so I'm
Google
not.
it.
I'll
Google it.
Google
You'll
it.
see.
I'm gonna Google it later. I'll Google it later when we're not chatting. But yeah, also the thing is, there's other factors of Earth. Like that's why I feel like, that's why I'm not a huge fan. Don't get me wrong. I don't say climate change doesn't exist, but I feel like once again, it's like because of messaging, people lose fact of like, things like arsenic in our water, like lead being thrown into public usage areas, and then all of a sudden people getting lead poisoning in water. Like there's so much things about pollution that have nothing to do with climate change. That is about actual people's lives, quality of life
Where
issues.
at one time they thought that these things were good or beneficial, and
Yeah,
now they discovered they're not. But nobody purposely said, let's kill off humans.
yeah, I agree.
Nobody does that. So
Nobody does.
yes, can
Unless you're
common
not,
sense rule
unless you're
and
not.
say when the Hudson River, when the fish are floating in the Hudson River, along with multicolors of layers of oil and gasoline,
And
maybe
dead
we need to
monsters.
do something to change the river. Yeah, in the 70s, they put out the Hudson River Conservation, and now you can go fishing in the Hudson River because life will come back real fast. No, you can actually eat it. The
I would.
toxicity levels, sediment constantly settling on the floor. So all the toxic stuff is all buried. That's why they don't want dredging going on. Like they wanted to dredge for deeper shipping because, we're losing out to California and some other states, like New Orleans, which is sinking. We're losing out to other states on deep water shipping because we don't have these deep water ports. So they wanted to, under Giuliani, I believe it was, he wanted to dredge. And they were like, no, because we've now gotten to a point where that sediment has covered, the toxic stuff. It's now deep enough where it's not leaching up into the fish and the animals. And if you dredge, you're just going to drag all that shit back up again. So they actually didn't, I believe they just did limited, like areas where, they didn't think the pollution would be too bad. They dug a little bit. But so the thing is, humans are capable of fixing anything on this planet that we're destroying. Can we revive an animal that we hunted to extinction? No.
But no, not yet. But they're getting to there. Yeah, they're doing.
Yeah, they're getting close to that.
I hope they bring back the dodo bird. I feel like that's
going to be the first one to come back.
Hopefully, I feel like if they did that, it would really it would be a real good feel-goodism for people.
Yes, because it was the stupidest bird in the world, and they used to just go on the island and club them to death because they were so dumb. They didn't even walk, like they weren't afraid. They were just so stupid.
They're like penguins. They were like
they were like penguins. They're like penguins with big beaks. And the sailors would pull up ashore. These birds never saw one of these people in their life, so they weren't afraid. And you just club them, and you got yourself a delicious bird meal for dinner.
Tastes like chicken. Tastes like chicken. Yo, I want to go to Dodo Fried Chicken. I think they Dodo Fried Chicken. That'd be the best place.
Dodo. No, the point is, they're going to revive all these animals, I'm sure, somehow,
hopefully,
in the future.
But, I mean, some of these rhinos that are being poached to death, that's like, and the funny thing is, once again, that's the Chinese. It's not even Americans who can buy this poached stuff.
It's Americans. It's hunters.
It's
from
mostly
all over the
Chinese.
World, game
hunters.
Mostly.
No, it's for the horn. They get the horn from them, and they
for
use
the rhino. It's the horn. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just
everything's about growing your penis in China.
It's true. Yeah. Listen, if you want a penis growing balm, if you want a bigger balm, I got you.
Yes. You want to last a long time and you want bigger penis? You eat this. Eat tiger penis. Eat tiger balls.
All right.
That's why everything's being hunted to extinction, because everybody believes that this thing will grow my penis over there. Also, there's too many Chinese people. Like, there's 1 billion in you. You're obviously having no problem procreating. Why do you need a bigger penis? So there could be 2 billion in you? Makes absolutely no sense to me.
Listen, also, when, it used to be that.
Hold on. Somebody that doesn't exist in my podcast is saying something. What?
Soy lowers testosterone levels, and
so there's 1 billion of them?
There's not anymore. The population's gone down dramatically.
Oh, the population of Asians is dropping because of soy.
Okay. I didn't know that. But all right, if that's the case. Anyway,
We're tiger penis then.
All right, we're gonna stop recording here, but don't hang up. All right, so this will be it. I'm not eating any tiger penis. I'm good with that. I'm good with what I got. I'm working it.